Right. How can we better use local products and local services for the council? This is a very good question. I'm glad one of your readers actually asked this, because it's very important. Recent changes in government legislation actually allow the council now to spend up to 15% of its budget on local services and local products. Now that can be across a range of different issues. So we can buy local food, we can use that local food in schools, we can buy local stationery, we can buy from local service suppliers, whether that's cleaners and things. Now you must be aware that the councils have got to demonstrate beyond normal credible ability that they are in fact doing things in a fair way, and there are also limits to how far you can take this, because you have to be clear, seem to be very clear about what you contract out and what has to go effectively for tender, and the tender processes must be very clearly tied in. But having said all that, we must work much harder to spend as much money as we can within the Bay and within Bay companies and Bay industries.
Okay, so earlier on I said I run a financial business where I deal with £1 million portfolios on the international market. And what I do for my clients is I look at the world economies, what I think is going to happen, and then I move the money around the world accordingly. And at the moment, UK PLC is not high up on the buy list. Why I say that is I read the signs of the times. And as a mayor, I would have to manage a shortened budget of over £100 million. And therefore I've got to look at ways to get more money into the Bay to stop the flow out. Procurement is one of the solutions I've thought of, because in a budget of say £300 million that we have in the Bay at the moment, something like 35 to 40% of it, and it could be more, I'm asking the questions, goes to businesses outside the Bay. Why isn't it within the Bay? So I've raised these questions. I want to know, when I get into office, where did we spend the money last year? How much of it went to business outside? Why couldn't it have gone to businesses inside? If we've got the businesses inside, enable them to tender for that business, simplistically, not going through a whole load of red tape so they can't do it, but they're able to. So I would set up meet the buyers seminars and meetings to look at procurement. If we didn't have the businesses in the Bay, let's get them in the Bay. That will bring employment in the Bay, and then we got more money coming into the Bay. So procurement is way up on my list of helping businesses.
Good question now on procurement and what can we do to ensure the council spending, which is something over £100 million a year, benefits the local economy. Our Torbay Development Agency and procurement officers are working with the small business community, particularly with the Federation of Small Businesses, to increase the amount of local spend. So it's a question of making contracts more attractive for local businesses. However, we have to work within the European Union competitiveness or procurement framework, and we can't exclude companies from away. And it's interesting, we often talk the Bay down. There are some hugely successful businesses within the Bay. I think of architects, one can think of other professional practices, accountants and so on, who provide in turn services to other places and other people. So if we're to sort of draw up the drawbridge and say we're only going to spend money locally, there is a danger also that other areas might not then procure services from Torbay. But if you can increase the value of the spend locally, informing a small business in particular of opportunities to bid for work, I think that's the way forward. But you have to do it within the law, and you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. There was a big row in the full council a few months ago. They wanted to change a policy of the development agency to only procure particular forms of business locally, and it was thought that actually there would be a backlash in the surrounding areas within the southwest, as we have some medium-sized and larger construction companies based in the Bay who actually deliver services to other councils in other areas. So what you don't want is other areas not to be procuring from the Bay. So it's increasing competition, working with small businesses to let them know what the opportunities are, but being mindful of what the European Union procurement regulations are. We can't do something that's illegal.
There is a slight problem
with the procurement issue here, because the council is tied up with bureaucratic red tape and all of the legal situation in terms of European regulations. But the aim has been and still is to try and get that figure up to 20%, because 20% is the figure that the European Union actually allows councils to say, we will do this in our local plans. I would like, and I think actually the council would like, to get that figure up even higher, and I think you can do that by twisting a few arms, by influencing contractors to try and encourage them to use local businesses. So it's difficult to build it into the contract, but I think there's a lot more you can do through persuasion and arm twisting to try and get that figure up, to ensure that local benefit does come from those sorts of contracts.
The council, over the last 30 years, have outsourced every service that they are responsible for. I believe that there are some services which should be run directly by the council. If this was done, obviously this would keep a lot more work in the bay, and I believe that it would be more efficiently run as well. So therefore, that's the way that I would get over this.
As an independent mayor, I would look very carefully at how we keep more money in the bay and how we look after you, the voters, to keep more money in your pocket. The council has a certain amount of money which they use on procurement in getting large businesses to come into the bay. I'm not saying I'm going to stop that, because obviously we need that as well as the small businesses. We have to encourage small businesses into the bay and offer them perhaps a reduction in the business rates, offer perhaps apprenticeships to small businesses, to make sure that more businesses in the bay are more viable, so that the money will circulate within the bay instead of going out to the huge retailers which are based either in London, Bristol, etc. We have to work very hard at encouraging all these businesses to be much more viable.
With regard to procurement, it's very important that we have local jobs for local people. So one of the things that I would be looking at is increasing the number of people locally who are able to procure to the council. Some of the issues which prevent local businesses from procuring is the complexity of the procurement process. A lot of it is online, and there are very large numbers of forms which have to be filled in. What I would seek to do is to make that a much simpler process and to provide support for those who have not gone through it previously, and to see whether we can put a balance in there such that we can prioritise people who live within the local area in terms of our supply.
The Green Party has a long history of supporting strongly local businesses and community. A Torbay Borough Council that doesn't spend most of its money in procurement locally is something I'd actually like to change. Supporting local businesses, not only via the money you spend, but also via the planning system, is extremely important. Our high streets in Torbay are full of national chain stores. We've got Clone Town Britain going on here. One of the first things I'd like to do when elected mayor, is to use more local services. I don't just mean local council services, I mean services supplied by local businesses, food, energy, general supply of goods to the council is the first port of call for me, and supporting local businesses, developing community is something that's really close to the heart of the Green Party, and the onward march of the chain store here in Torbay is something that is actually killing our high streets. Up and down the town centres in Paynton, Torbay and Brixham, we've got closed shops, and we don't really have a diverse local economy with regard to local businesses, and that's something that we really need to work hard on. Every pound you spend in a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, 80 pence of that pound leaves the local area. It doesn't circulate locally at all. Only If you compare that to when you spend it in a local shop, up to £1.60 can actually circulate, and that obviously promotes community, and it helps us also be more involved in what's happening around us. It promotes local prosperity too, and it also makes our communities more resilient. You know, we've got centralised food and energy throughout the whole of the UK, not just here in Torbay, but Torbay barely produces any of its own food or energy, and that's something I'd really like to focus on to make our community more resilient and get money spent in procurement by Torbay Council circulating more locally and setting a good example of how we want to move forward.
The council, one of the last council meetings at the end of last year, the council agreed with a proposal that I backed. That is to make sure that 20% of all new contracts employed local people, so we keep the income here in Torbay. To do more than that would break European Union rules on competition, so that's a maximum we could achieve, but it shows our commitment to encouraging local people to get jobs and a share of any major contracts that come. I believe in supporting, wherever possible, local contracts, but we are in a world with competition, international competition, so we welcome business from all parts of the world, but if we can keep our business here to benefit local people and work more with local businesses where we don't have big transport costs, particularly with food and other major items that are very important to people's livelihoods. The more we can do on that basis, the better. But in principle, I support it. Where you have contracts that are given by the council, great thought goes into them about maintaining the local contacts. It comes back to my original point: local jobs for local people to build our economy back, because that has got to be our #1 priority.